Is it truly a no-brainer to skip the upcoming Shamane banner? Welcome back to Corky Gachas, and in this video, I'm going to discuss Reverse 1999's upcoming character in 5 days time, Shamane, and whether you should be pulling for Shamane, because the general consensus that I have been hearing around have been a lot of people wanting to skip Shamane for their personal reasons, and in this video, I'm going to discuss these reasons, pros and cons of skipping Shamane, why you should pull, why you should skip, and help you make that decision, because I still see a lot of comments asking on this particular question. So first up, let's take a look at his kit and what he is all about. So Shamane is a 6-star base unit that deals reality damage, and what he does is mainly debuffing. So with his first skill, Spirit Medium, he's able to debuff similar to Beacon, right? Applying damage taken plus 10% debuff as well as reality defense. But this time around, he also inflicts mental defense minus 15% for all the enemies for 2 rounds. So on top of what Beacon already does, he goes one level higher to add in an extra layer, which is mental defense that Beacon does not cover. Beacon only covers reality defense. And you go to level 2, the damage taken is going to increase from 10% to 20%, go to level 3, 20% to 30%. But notably, compared to Beacon, the defense factor does not increase at all. So this is one of the cons when it comes to comparing these two skills, particularly, of course, not through characters, but just the skills alone. Beacon is more specialized on reality defense, and from that end, the higher star cards give more value to reality defense debuff. So this is the first factor. Next one is going to be his DPS skill, which is a one target apprentice dance. Over here, this is quite simple. It's just dealing reality damage, but at the same time, from 2-star onwards, he will gain a stack of Nature's Blessing. More on that later on. Okay, lastly, we're going to have his ultimate. His ultimate is Addict of Admin, and this skill is a mass attack AoE skill that deals 250% reality damage to all enemies, and then on top of that, also enjoys a critical rate plus 20%. Excess critical rate is converted to crit damage. So this is only really relevant at higher portraits because you are not going to as easily cap, right, compared to some of the other units like Leader. So this is rather moot point, but the straight up 20% crit rate is good, and also it deals an additional 250% reality damage to the main target. So think of it like splash attack, with it being a 500% reality damage to the main target and then splashing over. So lower percentage than a straight up single target ultimate compared to other of the units, but it also enjoys additional damage to AoE. So this is kind of a hybrid attack. Now, the next thing we're going to go on to is going to be his insight, and it's also mainly where some of his damage prowess come in. So first up, we can see for each of the stats down status on the target, the attack enjoys 8% damage increase. Our max is 24%, and with this just one dispel, you're already going to apply 3 stacks of this stats down, meaning it's going to straight up get 24% increase under those considerations, and it's quite easily to have full coverage, right? If you know how to use Beacon, if you said how to use Beacon, just have it always be under coverage. You're going to have extra of this damage dealt increase, and then when you enter the battle, you're going to gain Nature's Blessing. So basically what Nature's Blessing does is you can treat it as effectively extra Muxi. So when he casts the ultimate, right, depending on how many stacks of the Nature's Blessing he have, it's going to consume them and gain an equal amount of Muxi. So just simply put, it is gaining extra Muxi. So this is the insight as well as the skills. Next, we move on to the portrait, and portrait over here, you can see for P1, it is going to be, once again, Nature's Blessing, more Nature's Blessing. So when you enter, instead of 2, it's going to give you 5. So it is straight up getting more Muxi in that sense, okay? And there is no cap to this Nature's Blessing. So if you consume 5 when you use the ultimate, the leftover will not be wasted in that sense, okay? So this is one thing to take note of. And the next one is going to be Addict of Admin. This is where the DPS factors really come in, right? From P2 to P5 itself is going to involve more on the damage wise. So it's going to be 60% extra crit rate. If you overcap once again, this will go to crit damage. So you can treat it as 60% crit damage if you already cap, and also ensuring that you always crit. Next one is going to be Apprentice Dance changing percentage. It's quite simple. Once again, Addict of Admin giving more damage. And lastly, once again, crit rate. So whatever that adds crit rate, that portrait is going to perform a lot better compared to the rest. This is simply what you're going to take it as. Okay, so this is the whole kit that I've already broken down. Now, before we go any further, there's just one thing that I want to address, and that is what kind of a Shamane we are trying to evaluate today. Whether is it high portrait or low portraits, because at higher portraits and at low portraits, he takes on a completely different role, and he's a completely different beast, no pun intended, because at higher portraits, he is more of a DPS carry. At lower portraits, he's strictly a debuffer sub-DPS. So in this video, I'm just going to touch more on a debuffer sub-DPS role at lower portraits, because I think that pool decisions are harder to make for non-whales, right? Free to play and light spender. So this is where we are going to tackle it from. Now with that said, this brings us to our first point, which is to consider what are the alternatives that you personally have. This is very basic when it comes to making pool decisions. I always ask people to tell me what they have in their box, because this is a game whereby we are trying to fill in certain roles, certain slots. So this is really key. And since we are looking at Shamane as a debuffer role, we are going to look at first other debuffers such as Beacon. We are also going to consider buffers as well, because some of the buffers are also offensive in nature. Increasing the damage that your allies deal is effectively the same as debuffing the enemy so that they take more damage. So you can compare these two apple to apple. And just to give you guys some examples, I would consider Ununly, I would consider Beacon when looking at alternatives for Shamane. Even Pickles would be a good alternative to Shamane. And if you have seen my tier list already, I rate all of these debuffers very highly, because this game really needs those roles, and they can function a lot better with just a click of a button as compared to carry that really need to use a lot more cards. So from that perspective, if you have a lot of these debuffers already, then you might consider skipping Shamane in favor of saving for other units to fulfill other roles that your box currently lacks. Now of course, that is just at the surface level. You might be thinking, hey Cocky, so does it mean that if I have these characters, I don't want to pull Shamane because I cannot use them together? Nope, because the buffs and buffs, right, they actually can coexist and they can amplify each other, right? Because this game, only the same type of debuffs and the same type of buffs will stick with each other and will override each other, the bigger value of course. But if you were to put in Ununly and Shamane, you can still have them function. But what I'm speaking about is more general, because a lot of this game is about 3-man content. If you think about the roles, right, it's just carry, sub-DPS and healer. You always need a carry, you always need a healer. Of course, you can run 2 sub-DPS, but it's not as optimal because the carry will utilize AP a lot better. Which is why if you are looking strictly at 3-man content, if you already have 2 of the buffers, good buffers or debuffers, right, technically you do not need Shamane. So this is just from a buffer-debuffer front. So that's the first aspect. The second aspect that you want to push Shamane is going to be for the damage. Although we've mentioned that his main role is as a debuffer, but the fact is a lot of his kit revolves around damage, because you can see, right, from his insight increasing 24% damage and also having the ability to technically Muxi gain in his own way with his stacks, right, mean that his DPS cannot be scoffed at. Which is why you might also want to consider Shamane as pulling for DPS, and specifically Beast DPS. And the reason why I say so is because the current Limbo as well as the upcoming Limbo, we are going to face plant enemies. So if you are a beginner, especially when you don't have a box full of other strong hyper carries, right, then potentially you might want to pull for Shamane, given the fact that he is potentially one of the only beast DPS that you can reliably get on your hands for now until maybe 1.5 when Spatodia comes. So this might be one of the factors. Clearing Limbo is playing for now is also increasing your pool income in the future, which personally is the way I play the game. I pull characters to clear content. So if you're a beginner and you don't have an established box, clearing Limbo will be your utmost priority, and pulling Shamane will be beneficial from this end since you are facing the plant enemies. Moving on, I want to touch on the next important thing after I have settled the issue of whether you really truly need Shamane. So that is the first point. The second point is going to be evaluating upcoming banners. As always, we have already spoken this to the death, right? This game is not really that generous with pool income. Hence, you have to make pool decisions very carefully. And considering upcoming content as well as upcoming banners is the utmost priority that we have to look at. And one of the most anticipated upcoming banners is going to be the 6th banner. So this banner is coming in roughly 40 days time. So in 40 days, we are going to see a brand new banner. And that means that these 2 banners, like Shamane banner and 6th banner, they are very close apart. If they are further apart, then potentially if you were to pull for Shamane, you can still try to get 6 easier because you have more time to accumulate pulls. And in this way, I'm going to say that 6 is going to be a very strong character that you do not want to miss for most people, right? Unless you do not like a NPC looking character, then potentially you can just skip 6. You don't care about power levels, but he's very strong. He can cleanse, he can buff, he can debuff, albeit a bit RNG, but still I think that he is one of the strongest character after 2 fairy banner, which is one in 1.2. So a lot of people are saving for 6 banner, me included. So this is also why some of the people will consider Shamane to be a skip banner, because they do not have enough pool income to go for 6. And if you ask me if I can only pick one character between 6 and Shamane, no brainer, I would go for 6. But of course, that is provided you have already settled your now problems, right? Whereby you can clear Limbo fully, you can clear all the content, the U2, etc., so that you will not feel left out when it comes to the events and the rewards that you are potentially missing out for not having an established character to help you clear content. Now, on the other hand, another thing that is also important is about the future-proofness of a character. So although 6 is really good, right? Potentially you might already have enough currency to go for 6, and you're looking at one more character and you're asking me, hey Corky, is this guy worth it when it comes to future-proofness? And with that, I'm going to tell you 100%. The reason is very simple. In this game, right, especially in 4-man content, right, we still revolve around the structure of 1 hyper carry, 2 support slash DPS, sub-DPS, and also 1 healer. So you can think of it as sub-DPS role is very highly sought after, since you need more of them. So in that case, right, this is also why I think that Shamane, from a first factor, his role itself is already future-proof. Furthermore, when it comes to considering future-proofness, we also have to take a look at the effectiveness of portraits, because in the longer run, we are going to have access to accidentally getting some of these units, right, since Shamane is going to be added into the standard banner after 3 patches, as with all of the limited characters. So in the future, we might potentially just lose the 50-50, hit Shamane, and this portraits will determine also whether this character is future-proof. And in that sense, Shamane is extremely future-proof because his portraits boast a lot of increment. You can just tell, right, especially P2 as well as P5, it gives a lot of crit rate, which translates to crit damage. Regular characters, right, when P0 to P5 is only 20+%, and of course the newer characters have battle rates at around 30%, 40%, but for Shamane, I think it exceeds 50%, so it's one of the better ones with high portrait value. So as a free-to-play player, you are looking at potentially getting Shamane in the future, not right now at high portraits, but in the future, if you accidentally get more portraits, you're going to get higher value out of those accidental 50-50 that you have missed. Now in this point, I've pretty much covered the reasons why you should or should not pull for Shamane, but you might be thinking, hey Corky, I've really decided Shamane is absolute chat, I'm going to pull for him. He go hui hui on the mountain and cast ultimate and then slams down on the opponent. Really good character, so I'm going to pull for him. But how many portraits should I go for him? Should I go for P1, right? Because P1 is more on a realistic end when it comes to free to play and like spenders. So just to take a look at P1, right, it gives you 3 extra nature's blessing. People do not know how to value this, but when it comes to the actual rotation, you can see on your screen itself, the Android user has provided the rotation calculations on what you should be looking at when it comes to Shamane rotations. 1 AP per round is going to be quite reasonable. The only other thing is going to be a 2-star single target card that they use in their simulations. So this is going to vary slightly whether you have the 2-star cards to gain extra 1 stack. But you can see, right, it basically just means that instead of casting the ultimate on turn 12, you are going to cast an ultimate on turn 9. So it's an earlier ultimate in that sense. Just think of it as extra muxi, but in the shorter run, it might not even give you 1 ultimate benefit. So I don't think that P1 is worth going for, and also with my point, right, I think P0 is enough for all characters. Now, regardless of whether you think that Shamane is a skip for you or a pull for you, you might still be interested in this video that I have over here documenting my personal tier list for 1.4. I'll see you guys over there. This is Corky Gachas, signing off.